Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to the podcast that explores the world within and out. And thank you for subscribing to Traveling Inside Out, wherever you get your podcast from. And if you can rate it on Spotify, that would be amazing. Thank you. I've named this episode Transitioning to New York because I have moved to New York and I do live in New York. But before doing that, I'm thinking that there might be some new people who are listening to the podcast, and I've thought to kind of reintroduce myself and give a bit of a backstory of why I decided to have the podcast and whatever I've done since then. So I started the podcast in August of 2018. Try to think back, what were you doing back in August 2018? Doesn't it feel like it was 20 years ago? And at the same time, maybe just like last month, I don't know. Um, because I was fresh out of my South American trip. And when I say my South American trip, I'm just calling it my South American trip because I've done a career break in which I decided to backpack through South America in 7 countries by myself for 8 to 9 months. And after that, I decided to. A lot of people were just feeling so curious about my trip, and for me to tell them, like to motivate them to go out there and explore the world and so on, in which I thought I could just have the podcast and then let people hear my experience like that. So this was the main reason. But I always wanted to talk about how you feel inside as well. So that's why the title, the name of the podcast is Traveling Inside Out, because I'm talking about the world within and the world out there, like outside of your own self, basically. And at the time, I was living in Iceland, and I've actually decided that I can't. I wasn't okay. So I've finished the crazy trip, and then I came back to Iceland, and immediately after I had a breakdown, I would call it. So I decided to quit my job. So basically, I started the podcast soon after I quit my job, and I was like, okay, let's talk about quitting a job, about traveling the world, about trying to figure out where you are, about having anxieties, about all of this stuff. Ever since then, I moved back to Romania, which I'm originally from. Then I got my driving license. I've explored. I did a little bit of trips around and about, and eventually I decided to move back to Iceland just before the pandemic started. So I was stuck in Iceland during the pandemic, and then I managed to get jobs again, and finally and eventually I moved to United States, to New York. Now, the thing that I didn't mention was that meanwhile I met my who is now my partner, my husband. At the time, obviously, we were just dating and all that. So I've decided to move to New York City to be with my partner. Now, not to say I've been to New York, I think, I don't know, 7 or 8 times before meeting him. So I was kind of in love with New York to begin with. And I think this is why I felt attracted to people from New York, because I felt it was just another world for me. It was simply something that is so hard to describe. For people who have traveled before, they know that feeling when you go into a new place where you haven't been before and still you feel at ease. That's how I felt in New York. And granted, I hate big cities. I hate crowded places. I hate everything that comes with it, basically. And yet in New York, I felt at ease. I felt a different kind of energy, that it was just so different than any other places where I've traveled. And it's also very crazy to me because I traveled to South America in the hope that I'm going to find the answers to what's next and what do I want to do and what do I want to, like, what am I imagining doing and so on. And I just realized that I don't think that South America is for me, though. I just don't think it is. There were a few places where I wanted to go back, and I did go back since then, but not so much that I actually would live out there. It wasn't the same with New York, though. I I was so in love with it that I was like, I want to move there. So eventually, it just happened that I found my partner in New York, and we really truly fell in love. And after 3 years of dating, we decided to get married. So now I'm here in New York, an actual resident, which is insane. Like if I would go back in time and say to 2015 Alina that guess what, you're going to be married to an American and you're gonna be a citizen in New York, I would be laughing at you because I like what that everything was like. It sounds from another planet, like in a parallel world. But here I am. And now I also want to say that I do have a few friends that are looking forward to visit me in New York, and every single one of them, and they don't know, I mean, they don't talk with each other. I am the basically the common factor, let's say, in the friendship. So everybody's keep telling me like, oh, I'm so curious to see your New York, to explore your New York. And I thought that I could make a podcast episode because it sounded kind of funny to me. Like, my New York, there's no more my New York. And what I mean by that is when I would come to New York as a tourist, as I think everybody knows that when you go somewhere as a tourist, it's a completely, or explorer, whatever, it's a completely different thing than when you actually live there. And I'm not talking about people who are, I don't know, like exploring by foot for 5 months within a country. I'm not talking like that. I'm just talking about tourists or people who are exploring a place for maybe up to a month or few weeks, maybe a weekend. It's completely different than when you live there. So the New York that I've known back then, it's different. And I mean, it's kind of different because then a pandemic happened and everything went to shit, and then it came back, and then it's weird and whatever. But you know that I'm in New York because obviously there's a alarm, like a police car or like an ambulance. I still don't know the difference between them when it comes to the sound. But yeah, so I made it my purpose when I was visiting New York as a, and I've actually, you can go back. Everything that I've said right now, if you are curious, you can just go back because I have, I think, almost over 170 episodes. But I've talked about dating in New York. I've talked about urban tourism. I've talked about also my anxieties. I've talked about South America. I've talked about everything that I just mentioned. There are episodes in which I'm telling you more about it. But just to basically briefly sum up sum up is the same thing, Alina. Briefly say about my experience of exploring New York before moving here was that, or before actually meeting my partner, was that I was mostly in Manhattan. I did made it my purpose to go to Brooklyn, visit. Like, for example, I visited Prospect Park twice or 3 times before moving to Brooklyn. Also went to Astoria. I went to Long Island City. I even went to Bronx once, just once, but I did go to Bronx. And no, I did not go to look for the stairs. I just went to for the sake of going and seeing the Bronx. And obviously, I took the ferry to Long Island, Staten Island. But then I came back because nobody goes to Staten Island. I feel like a New Yorker. You know what? It's like it's these two worlds that are fighting within me. I'm starting to sound a little bit like a New Yorker, but at the same time, I'm like, no, but I want to be kind to other people living in wherever they live, because that's BS. So like it's a bit of a struggle within me, like to make some jokes and be like, should I go for should I go for the joke? Maybe not. Anyway, so my New York doesn't exist because the New York that I knew back then, it's not with the New York that I'm knowing right now. Because the New York that I'm knowing right now, it's also considers us being part of United States. And when you think about United States, I mean, probably most people, when they think about United States, they have some certain places in mind. Maybe you think about California, maybe you think about Florida, maybe you think about New York area, maybe you think about Texas. But most of people, they have just some specific things that they know about it, which most of the time is bad. I know, Americans listening to me, you don't want to hear it, but that's what the rest of the world thinks about you. I'm sorry to let you know, but that's how it is. However, the transitioning to New York, so again, United States, New York, but it needs to be said that I live in Brooklyn, in a specific area in Brooklyn. So my perspective comes from this area, right? Again, obviously. Okay, so let's get into it. I want first and foremost, like one of the most important things that everybody probably thinks about is the access to events. There's always something happening in New York. There's, especially during the summer, this is going to be my first summer that I'm going to fully be in New York for. I've been before, like I've been in the beginning of June, I've been in July, I've been in New York. I don't know if I've ever been in New York in August, to be fair. To be completely honest, no, I know this. So the months that I've been in New York so far. And that means either a month or a few weeks or a weekend. So I've been in June, I've been in July, I've been in September. I've been I've been in October. No, I have been, what I'm trying to say is now before I moved here. And I moved here end of October. Beginning of October last year. I guess I was here in December and then February. And I mean December and a bit of January and then February. So these are the months where I've been to New York before moving to New York, right? So now, since I moved to New York in October, it's been quite a few months. And they were not easy, man. Now, let's put a pin on that. And again, for people who have not listened to this podcast at all, I have to say, I have been born and raised in Transylvania, Romania. But I have lived one semester abroad as a student in Turkey, 5 months in Tunisia, where I was volunteering, 2 months in Denmark when I worked in a fish factory. All of these, again, are episodes that I've talked about. So if you are curious to know more about it, scroll back into the episodes and check for the country or for the whatever I just said, and then you can find the story behind it. And then I moved to Iceland, but Iceland was always complicated. I moved in and out like 4 times with Iceland. And each time thinking like, this is the last time I'm leaving Iceland, bye, never see you again. And yet I still went back. Now, so moving to a new country or to a new culture or to any of that, it's not at all something that I've never done before, or like, it's something that I'm used to. And since, I mean, come on, we have been watching cartoons and movies and shows and more recent years, YouTube videos and so on, that everybody's kind of accustomed with American culture, more or less. It's still not the same when you move here. As much as you think you're prepared, it's still not the same. So, one of okay, so now let's go back to one of the things that everybody is excited is the amount of events. And opportunities to go and see stuff. And yes, indeed, I love to go and see a projection during Tribeca Film Festival, which is known. It's a known film festival. Robert De Niro being one of the founders, that was founded after 9/11, kind of in a try to bring New York back, basically. So I hope that maybe one day I can work for the film festival. Who knows? I love being able to go and watch that. Obviously, we went and we saw yet another Broadway play. We've seen Aladdin, and I've seen 3 other Broadway plays before meeting my husband, which was Chicago, Margaretville, and Waitress. Speaking about Waitress, we went to an event, but eventually didn't work out, in which they had this crazy idea of projecting in Times Square, and you just have to download an app and listen to the music. So you watch the screen in Times Square, but unfortunately the rain started, so I after half an hour I gave up and I was like, okay, let's go. There's a lot of other concerts. I'm going to go to a Pink concert in November. The sad part was that I really thought I'm gonna be in Europe this time of year, and so as you're listening to this podcast on Monday, on Sunday I would have been in Vienna I bought tickets and everything to enjoy Pink concert. Unfortunately, it's not happening. So I'm gonna go to a concert in November. Before the strike, currently, if you don't know, the writers are on strike, like the ones for movies and like the screenwriters and so on. And because of that, all of the night shows are on a hiatus. But I was able to go to be in the public of night shows. And then there are all sorts of other festivals. I've seen like summer night projections outdoors of classic movies or so on. We went and we saw in a classic event, we went and we saw When Harry Met Sally, and we actually saw like what's his name? Billy. Oh man, why am I'm blanking on the name. Who's Harry from Harry Meets Sally? Billy Billy Crystal. He was there and he was talking about and it's so crazy to me how so many years later he can still talk about this insane movie and how it's still appreciated in nowadays circumstances. So that was amazing. And actually, it's really funny because the place where we've been to was the place where the Tony Awards took place. So it was just I didn't been to the Tonys obviously, but like it was really 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 lovely. Then again, we went to a spa, which was back in January, and the spa was just opening in November. So we went there rather recently to an insane spa that was very fancy and so on. I still don't think I talked about it though. What else? Then we went to events that are a bit surrounding my husband's career. And we went to one this last weekend that just passed. And it was really great to see people connecting. It's in the film industry, basically. It's from a program for people who want to join the film industry. So it's a program for 4 weeks. And then you need to qualify because it's supported by the mayor office. Anyway. So we've been to a lot of events and probably many more to come. And then also we can go to like comedy shows and literally all sorts of things. Another thing that it's a difference from, especially from me living in Iceland, was that I've never managed to learn Icelandic language. And so because of that, everybody speaks English in Iceland, but you still need to know especially when you live there and you have um, paperwork to do. You still need to know Icelandic, and I didn't, and it was difficult. So at least here I speak English, so there's no problem for me to understand people, especially since I speak a little bit of Spanish too. So if someone would speak Spanish, I would be able to probably get the main point. Now, transportation. I've only lived for 9 months in Bucharest, which is the capital of my country, Romania. So that was the only city where I lived, where I was kind of mostly depending on the subway. And so that was something else that I had to get used to be using the subway. Now, MTA is being hated by everyone. And my problem is that they should freaking change the way that people go through those things, because everybody's keeping fair and they are going to make it even more expensive. And I don't want to get into it. Let's not get very political. But yeah, it sucks. It's dirty. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's too not on point, not getting there. But that's the main public transportation that I'm using. So there's that. However, while in town, I can walk all the blocks. There's no problem. So it's kind of easy to walk, and it's really, you really don't need a car if you live in New York. And I know everybody says this, but it's true. You really don't need it. Like, you can get there. Now, a car, in my opinion, would be extremely useful because there's a lot of things that you can do outside of New York. And then you would need a car for that. I have been asked quite a few times about how do I feel about the crimes that are happening in New York, or the gun violence and so on. And now I have to say that I am still currently in a democratic state, which probably doesn't say much to most people, but it says a lot to people who know what I'm talking about. So I don't want to get more into it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, do some research between the difference between democratic and republican states. So that's why I feel a little bit safer. That being said, the gun violence, it's something real. I have yet to see someone with a gun, and hopefully I'm not ever gonna do that. But I have to say, close where I am, like in the corner of the block where I live, there's always a police car parked. Now, do I feel safe? Like, this is one of the, I guess, the big questions. Do I feel safe because the police car is, or would I want to live in a place where there's no need of a police car to be at the corner of the freaking block, right? So you can take it both ways. I'm trying to be careful. I'm trying to pay attention where I'm going, what I'm doing, not to be an easy target, basically. But to be completely honest, that's the risk with all the big cities. So since I don't see it, and since we are so many, and I have to be also honest, other than the fact that I'm a woman, I'm a white woman. So unfortunately, I have to say this, and it sucks, but this is the reality. I'm not necessarily the target of most of the hate crimes. Is it fair? It is not fair. But do I feel a little bit safer because of that? Probably in my subconscious. This is a very complicated and difficult conversation, and I don't want to get into it. But I'm just asking, like, when people keep asking me, like, how do you feel about this and this and that? Well, I'm just scared as a woman to walk the streets because shit can happen to me just because I'm a woman. But that's kind of it. That's kind of it. And I've been like that my entire life. So my threshold of being scared and not being scared, it's where it is, and that's where I'm at. Like, I won't do anything different than trying to pay attention to my surroundings and always trying to figure out how to leave a place in like two steps or something like that. Something that I can't and won't get used to is the rats. Have I seen rats every day of my life? No. Have I seen them every month? No. But did we have mouse in our house? We did. I'm happy that it wasn't a rat and it was a mouse. I am. Is it horrible to see rats when you are in the evening by a park? It is. It's something that I want to see? No. But do you know what? I've seen rats back in Cluj-Napoca, in the city that I used to live in Romania too. And there's that. I guess rats are rats, man. There's nothing that I can do about that. Um, Another thing that I want to talk, and probably this I'm going to make a full episode about it, because I had episodes before in which I'm talking about my experience going to the doctors, especially in Iceland. And I have been recently to the doctor in the United States, so I'm going to probably make an episode about that. I do have health insurance, but we are paying a lot of money for that health insurance. And so I am also still learning and understanding, because what's very extremely frustrating for me is the fact that you might be getting a bill. Like, I'm used to, when I'm exiting the door of the doctor's place, that's when the transaction ends. And it's not like that in the United States. And I'm always stressed and annoyed and extremely panicked when I get bills that I'm like, wait, why am I having a bill? Like, I'm getting a bill 2 weeks later. So this is something that I have to get used to. The same with, you know how you keep getting spam emails from all sort of stuff in your mail, and then you're like, no, ignore, ignore, ignore. We get spam mails. That's something that doesn't happen in Romania, or maybe very little in Romania, almost at all in Iceland. So it's a little bit bonkers to me that banks and stuff like that, they're just wasting money. Like, I'm sorry. Why are you wasting money on sending so many letters, man? Also, the spam calls. Now, obviously, I have my phone number and I'm trying not to give it to random people and random places and so on, because I don't want to start getting spam calls and so on all the time. But the spam calls is something that I would never get in Iceland, and I would get from time to time in Romania. So this is another thing that I guess I need to get used to. Another thing that I would say it's important to talk about transitioning to New York is the fact that I have very few friends. So all of my friends that I've been in touch with are literally two. And I see them once in 1 million years, one of them, and once in a couple of months, the other one. And so it's a little bit sad, but I'm going to be honest. I'm starting to think that that's me. That might be me. And I mean, life getting in the way and stuff like that, but because I was kind of the same in Iceland and kind of the same in Romania. So I'm starting to think this is not New York. This is just me struggling to make new friends, or not being good at just having acquaintances, I guess. I guess for me, it's always about a stronger connection with people that I can really truly trust, and I haven't made any. Have not made any. Now, obviously, I haven't had any jobs, and usually, as an adult, you might be making friends either if you have any hobbies in which the other people are involved, or from your work and stuff like that. So I didn't have a job yet, and I'm still trying to get my jobs because my papers are okay. But I'm just saying, this part of transitioning to New York, it just might be me and how I function as a person. It might not be the fact that I live in New York or not live in New York. Yeah, so these are the main things that I'm just briefly mentioning. I'm gonna probably talk more about it in future episodes. But if you have made it so far, I want to say something. I decided to make the podcast once in 2 weeks, kind of a podcast, because I decided that I didn't decide it. I'm getting tired, and when I feel unmotivated, I would rather just slow down my role than stop it. So hopefully you're gonna stick with me. I'm going to try my hardest to do this every second week, and I'm going to keep this schedule until August. In September, I'm going to take a break and then come back with a new season, and I will see what decisions I make about the new season starting in October. But until then, let's enjoy summer. I'm actually leaving. I mean, by the time you're listening to this podcast, I'm actually traveling. Like, I am in the new place that I'm still not going to mention because I'm going to talk about it next week, in 2 weeks. That's what I just said. Literally, that's what I just said. So I'm going to talk about it in 2 weeks, and I'm going to let you know how it went. It's a short trip over the weekend, the long weekend, because it's 4th of July. Also, it's going to be my first time in New York, 4th of July. Are we going to do anything differently? I don't know if we're going to do. Am I going to go and see the fireworks? I don't know. We will see it. And another thing that I think is worth mentioning, just to finish basically the whole list of transitioning to New York, or the current list, is the fires that have been happening. It's something that I haven't seen before in my life. There are fires happening in Canada, and because of the wind, sometimes that smoke gets to us. And it got to us back in June, and it was horrendous because it was just a orange haze. You couldn't see the sky, the sun, anything. And now apparently we are kind of getting back that, but it's not as worse as it was back then. However, it's still not very safe, and this is something that I refuse to get used to. I refuse to get used to like forests always, like I don't want to get used to fires and smoke and people dying, losing their shit, losing their stuff, losing their houses, and animals dying. I don't want to get used to this. Would something like this happen in Iceland? No, but Iceland has volcanoes, and if a volcano erupts, then that smoke is real, like the ash and everything is real. So I'm just saying, and that's Mother Nature 101. When a volcano erupts, that's like proper Mother Nature. So let me know if you have any questions about New York. In any case, you know how to reach me. If you don't, listen to the outro. And again, see you or listen to me or whatever in 2 weeks. This concludes today's episode. Thank you for listening and for reviewing Traveling Inside Out. If you want to get in touch with me, send an email to podcast@alinaigrad.com. And remember, your outer journey begins with inner work. Until next time.